Cardinals fans are having strong reactions this week to a recent radio interview in which Cardinals Hall of Famer Jim Edmonds had some strong words about the organization. What's going on, everyone, and welcome into this edition of B-Schaeff Daily. Brenden Schaeffer with you. Tuesday, February 4th, 2025. Wanted to do an episode kind of talking about the reaction to the Jim Edmonds interview from TMA on 101 ESPN the other day, in which Jim Edmonds came on and talked about the fact that he was not going to be on Cardinals television broadcasts anymore. That's the news aspect of this. If you hadn't seen that update, that ball game will no longer be part of the Bally Sports. Now it's FanDuel Sports crew. And he talked in the interview about the reasons for that. And it also sort of bled into some, I don't know if you'd say disgruntled thoughts, some airing of grievances as it pertains to the state of the St. Louis Cardinals, and fans have had a big reaction to this interview. So I wanted to talk about it, give my take on sort of where I come down on some of the things that Jim Edmonds said. I think a lot of what he said you can kind of look at, and if you're a Cardinal fan who has been really frustrated with the team in recent years, the direction of the club, you probably hear the things that a team Hall of Famer is saying and say, aha, that's exactly right. I knew it was true, and now I'm hearing it from somebody of some prominence. But I want to take through a couple of the clips that I heard in the interview that stood out to me and kind of give my thoughts on it from Jim Edmonds as he departs the organization. It's not that he was in the organization per se, because he was working for the TV company for Bally, which is, of course, part owned by the Cardinals, and that whole deal. And now it's FanDuel Sports, but he's going to be moving on. So he wasn't a team employee per se, but it kind of seems like Jim found himself in the in-between and ultimately didn't really know kind of where he fit in and didn't feel, in his words, as you'll hear, super welcome to be around the club in recent years in ways that maybe he had experienced before. So that's kind of the gist of it for anybody who hasn't heard it. I do want to recommend off the top, before I play a couple of the clips, recommend that everybody go and listen to the full interview if you'd like the full context, because I'm always going to preach that the context is king. And I think even within the course of this interview, it can be important to remember the context of Edmonds is the guy talking, but he's departing and feeling like he's going a separate way. So he may speak in a way that you wouldn't otherwise, necessarily hear somebody speak if their role or their status or their situation was different. So we'll try to break it down. We'll try to be fair to all parties involved, as Jim did as well in the interview, where you might say, oh, he really ripped the organization. But as you'll hear, he talked over and over about all the different people within the organization that he loves and couldn't necessarily pinpoint or chose not to, maybe is part of it, the reasons or who's to blame for the state of things and the way that he ultimately felt in recent years being around the club. So I want to play for you first a clip from this interview. And like I said, go to the Morning Afters podcast page. They've got their own app. They've got their own Spotify, YouTube, the whole bit, that you'll be able to find the Jim Edmonds full interview. It was nearly an hour long that they talked with Ball Game. So I want to just say that off the top, but we'll play this early in the interview where basically he had just told the story of his boss calling him from Bally Sports, and he wasn't really sure exactly what to say because he wasn't totally sure he wanted to be back this year. And ultimately, he describes a little bit of that conversation, but you'll hear it bleeds into sort of some of his general thoughts / grievances about the state of things. Here's this.
I'm not really sure I'm going to come back, and I'm pretty much sure that I'm done working. And he goes, oh, well, I called to tell you that we don't know if we're going to have you back this year. And I said, oh, that is so awesome. You just made my decision for me. Thank you very much. Have a good day. That's what I said and hung up.
Oh, wow. So it was as mutual as it could possibly be then.
Yeah, it's pretty much perfect, and it made me really happy about my decision. I probably hung on maybe a year too long, but, I don't really – my personality, I tried to, really toe the line on being, me. I try not to do anything wrong. I try to just say the right thing, I'm tired of doing that for everybody. I'm tired of listening to the critics. I'm tired of guessing if I'm doing the right thing or not. And I just had enough. It's total chaos. People working every day. I don't know where they're supposed to be. Can't get mics to work. TV doesn't work. The replays don't work. The game is so fast right now. You don't even have time to talk. They don't need two people in the booth. It's just commercial after commercial after commercial. I mean, it's not the same anymore, and it's definitely took a toll on just the fun part of it. So, that goes to that story right there. That's basically all that needs to be said. And spring training, I haven't gone really down to spring training in the last couple of years. It's just not. It's not fun anymore. The baseball is, they don't make you feel like you're wanted. Be around the stadium. I love Ollie, the DeWitts. I have so much respect for Mo. Everybody's great, but somehow indoors in the inner circle, it's just not the same. It's not the same organization. It's not fun to be around. They make it pretty obvious. Even the security guards, like, hey, it might not be a good time. I'm like, fine with me. I don't need to be in there. If you don't want me to tell your pitchers that they're tipping their pitch, I'm going to take my talents out here to Tennessee and learn how to be a gardener and a farmer.
So that was the kind of I guess, main part there. And look, it's like an hour, 49-minute long interview with Jim Edmonds, but you heard a lot there, and it kind of jumps around, right? Like talking about a lot of different things in a short period of time. I did think it was interesting. He had some thoughts about the broadcast side of things, people not knowing what to do. And in that clip, he broke FCC a couple times. I think Tim had a comment of, not the McAfee show, like said something he can't say. You kind of heard the blur there, and he's talking about that. So picking out some of the things I heard there from Jim Edmonds, talking about his frustration, right, where he says it didn't really feel like he was wanted, didn't make you feel like you were wanted to be around anymore down there. Says he hasn't gone to spring training the last couple of years, and I've been covering the Cardinals since 2016. I've been to spring training the last 5 or 6 years, and I was trying to rack my brain. Like, have I ever seen Edmonds down there at all? I couple times here and there over the course of the last 5 or 6 years. But yeah, Track said I don't think he's necessarily gone in the last few years, but he talks about like the replays not working and the microphones aren't turned on. Like, those are some things that the Cardinals don't have anything to do with, right? Like, Bally Sports is the place he worked, and I don't know the inner workings of Bally Sports, right? There's obviously a lot of kind of chaos going on a high level because it's a new name and stuff, and that change was incoming. But like that was kind of like some workplace grievances that I don't think has anything to do with the Cardinals, right? So you kind of have to contextualize Jim Edmonds complaining about anything and everything. And some of it's like, oh, that's interesting. I wonder what he's really getting at with that when it comes to the Cardinals. And some of it's like he doesn't like that the microphone doesn't work. So I don't really think that's really something that is as relevant to the Cardinals. But I think probably for a lot of Cardinals fans who are having a reaction, they're not hearing the part about the microphones not working and taking that ball and running with it. They're saying, well, why wouldn't a Cardinals Hall of Famer like Jim Edmonds feel welcome down at spring training? And it's a different feeling, and not as fun. He says not as fun being around the stadium anymore. So yeah, I mean, those are definitely some like big time. I don't even know if it's accusations, because you heard there in the same clip that I played that he said, loves Ollie, has a great relationship with Ollie, loves Mo, loves the DeWitts, but somewhere in the inner circle it's gone wrong. I don't know who is. I got to be real. I don't know who is in the inner circle, if not those people. So it's kind of talking out of both sides of your mouth a little bit, right? Like, I understand too, if you kind of want to say some things, you want to air some grievances, but you don't really want to air anybody out, so you don't name names, right? It says the security guard said maybe it's not a good time. I don't really know. I don't know. Is that like an isolated incident that happened once and made Edmonds feel like he wasn't, the rock star Cardinal Hall of Famer, and is it just a case of he doesn't know the people as well that are around the ballpark because it's been a few years? His buddies are gone. He talks about Chris Carpenter being somebody that, before COVID or whatever, he was down. I remember Carp being down at spring training. He was an instructor. He was on the field, like working with the guys. That was a COVID casualty, but it is one of those things that, and I think I'll play the clip maybe if I can find it, where Edmonds says it kind of felt like COVID was maybe the excuse to cut some things. And that would be, I'll find that clip now, because that would be an aspect of this that I would say, all right, that actually is like a concrete criticism in as much as it can be, where you don't really, again, I don't think Jim Edmonds was trying to rip people. I think he was talking about his experience, right? And how he has felt in recent years. And I think the reason that Cardinals fans have run with this so much is because it matches in a lot of ways their experience of watching the Cardinals and feeling disconnected from the franchise and from the organization. Like they weren't looking out for as a priority, like winning ball games and making sure the experience for the fans was great. And by fan experience, I do just mean wins. Like Cardinals fans want to see a winner. They're used to seeing a winner, and it's been a little stale the last couple of years, right? They haven't been able to get to where they were looking to go. And I mean, you can, depending on how long you look back at this, 2016 through 2018 was a stretch where the Cardinals missed the playoffs a bunch. And then they kind of had, a 3-year period where they were in the postseason. And now you're kind of going back in the other direction, and it's still the same people in charge, right? But at the same time, we know that this is a transition year for the Cardinals in more ways than one, not just in the way that they're handling the payroll and the way that they're hiring and making moves at the front office level, but like with Mozeliak, is going to be his last year. We know that to be the case. So I don't know. It's kind of hard to pinpoint. And I thought in this interview, Tim McKernan and Martin Kilcoyne and Doug Vaughn, they asked some really good questions of Jim Edmonds when he would kind of talk about something that sounded a little bit explosive and say, hey, could you follow up on that? What exactly do you mean by that? And he never really, I don't know, it just kind of stayed pretty vague in my opinion, but play a little bit more because like I said, I felt like Tim was asking some really good questions and giving Jim the opportunity to sort of expand upon what he really was feeling.
So when you say it's not as fun as it used to be, and you clearly have some frustration with the organization, what is it? Because from a fan standpoint, from a listener standpoint, we're on the outside looking in. You know what it was like to play. You also know what it was like to be an alumnus of the organization. You know what it's like to be a coach, as an instructor with the organization. What has changed? Because I can tell you a lot of fans also are frustrated right now, Jim.
Well, let me ask you this. You know a lot about this sport. When's the last time you've seen a Hall of Famer in the dugout in spring training?
So I thought this was an interesting question. I want to stop it and we'll continue to play. Hall of Famer in the dugout in spring training. I don't know, and they'll talk about, does that mean MLB Hall of Famer, Cardinal Hall of Famer? Jim, again, mentions that he hasn't been at spring training in recent years, but asking the question, Hall of Famer, like Willie McGee has been around this coaching staff he's a Red Jacket. He's a Cardinal Hall of Famer. But again, like think about the Cardinal Hall of Famers and the Cardinal alumni that Jim would know best, like a Chris Carpenter, I think is what that is getting into. It's a lot of this kind of felt like there's an isolated thing that he's bugged by and sort of making larger statements about it, right? There's no Cardinals Hall of Famers or alumni around. Well, there is Jason Isringhausen. Yeah, that's true. Well, and Willie McGee has been here for several years. That's also true. But Chris Carpenter, right? I feel like that was, and look, I'm with Jim Edmonds on this one. Like, I think the Cardinals completely bungled it around COVID when Jim Edmonds was in capacity as an advisor, and I'll get to that clip because I feel like that's maybe the crux of it. If he's got some grief with Mo about the way that went down, but again, was that a Mo decision? Was that a DeWitt decision? I hard to really say exactly how the Cardinals used COVID to sort of cut back. And guess what? Like, we have seen them basically go back on that and say that was a mistake. They didn't really admit it was a mistake to the extent that I think a lot of fans wanted to hear back in that end of season press conference when DeWitt Jr. was, a little bit prickly about people criticizing the development and maybe his caretaking of the organization. There's criticism there, and nobody likes to be criticized, and especially in a public forum. And so, he had the reaction to that he did. But I think now the Cardinals are taking the steps. That's what the timing of this is what's interesting, because Jim Edmonds is having this conversation now because he's on his way out, right? And you heard basically he said, I was kind of thinking I didn't want to come back, and they're saying, well, we were thinking we didn't want to have you back. And so, okay, mutual. But is there some feeling some sort of way about the state of that in conjunction with the organization and the front office moving in a different direction, hiring a bunch of different people, not Jim Edmonds people, right? It's the organization is moving forward, and could they be leaning a little bit more into their past? Absolutely. I think this is an organization that for a long time, and to Jim's point, what was he used to as a player? He was used to seeing Lou Brock around and Bob Gibson around and Ozzie and Whitey being around the building. Like, that was a common thing. Well, Ozzie's still around. Ozzie's down there at every spring training. I see him every year. Very very involved with the organization. Very unfortunately, I don't know like a way to say this without sounding crass, the other legends have passed away. It's awful. If you follow Cardinals baseball, you know what this organization has been through when it comes to just losing true titans of the franchise and of baseball and of Cardinals history in the past handful of years. Yes, it started around COVID, man, and it sucks. It's brutal. But that's, time has marched on in that regard. And so those friendly faces and those bastions of baseball wisdom that Jim Edmonds, I say grew up, but came up and had his playing career when those guys were around and hanging around the place all the time. Those guys have passed on. And so when you talk about the culture, like, all right, with the next generation that would step in, that would be guys like Jim Edmonds. And maybe to his point, he hasn't felt like he was embraced with open arms in quite the way that he hoped to be, if that's maybe a fair way to say it. Because I'm trying to phrase this carefully and be fair to all parties involved. And if you don't like that, you can tell me in the comments that I'm, this or that I'm that. But I'm just trying to give you my read on the situation, and you can take it for whatever you think that's worth. But I wanted to kind of pause there because Edmonds, and we'll get back to the question from this interview from the morning after. I believe this was from Monday, where he asks, when's the last time you've seen a Cardinal Hall of Famer in the dugout in spring training? So I'll play that answer.
I can't think of a time. Doug, Martin, you got anything?
McGuire, maybe? No, he's not in the Hall of Fame, is he?
No, I just mean like even guys with Carpenter and myself, and other than really Izzy being a coach and Ludwig, they just don't invite us down there anymore. It's a total different atmosphere, and it kind of makes you feel like you're not appreciated, not wanted, don't need your help. And like I said, I have the utmost respect for the people, but something's different as a whole. And I know the players feel it, the alumni feels it, and it's just different. It's just not as much fun.
So is it a case the organization doesn't want you guys around, or do you guys not want to be around the organization, Jim?
No, I don't know what it is. It's just that.
So he says, I don't really know what it is. It's a good question, because again, I frame this as I think it's specific to Jim Edmonds' experience. I would be curious to hear from other folks because Edmonds is name dropping, right? He's saying how Chris Carpenter and Carp again has been kind of off the radar from a Cardinals perspective when it comes to a lot of this, because I'm sure he was probably hurt when he was giving his time and wanted to be a part of the organization. Knows a lot about the game, right? Chris Carpenter and the Cardinals kind of cast him aside with COVID, and then after COVID didn't bring those types of guys back. And I think that's really the crux of where a lot of this is coming from with Jim Edmonds. But this is not new news, right? This is not new information. We've been railing on this for the last 2 years, and then there was a big press conference in October where the Cardinals were like, yeah, we have to kind of think about investing in some of these areas that we had let go, right? So that's what gets me. Is like the timing of it makes sense from Jim Edmonds' perspective because he can air this out because he's leaving. He's not going to be a part of it anymore, so that's always the easiest time to say these sorts of inflammatory things, which even it's not even that inflammatory. It's just the reaction has been inflammatory. But his timing makes sense. The timing, I think a lot of this is already kind of old news at this point, to the extent that like the Cardinals with the Carpenter stuff and investing in infrastructure, they let coaching positions go, and now they're hiring back. But maybe they're not hiring the right people back from Jim Edmonds' perspective. And that's for him to say. But I think that's where a lot of the frustration maybe comes. And look, I think if the Cardinals were smart about this, and if Edmonds was willing to do it, to be, I've seen a lot of Cardinals fans say, why wouldn't they hire him as a coach? Why wouldn't they have him? And I think that makes sense because when he was talking about tipping pitches and these different things, whatever you think about Jim Edmonds during the game broadcasts, there is no question in my mind that if he says in the broadcast booth, hey, that guy's tipping his curveball, that guy's probably tipping his curveball. Like, to me, Jim Edmonds, he's beyond reproach in that regard. I think he knows what he's talking about. I think he sees the game in a way that we can only dream, right? To see and understand the game of baseball like he does. So I don't doubt it for a second. But somewhere along the line, the interpersonal communications of him being able to feel like he could go into the clubhouse, like he's part of the Bally Sports broadcast, but he could go into the clubhouse. But was it like during media availability, like when everybody else could be in the clubhouse? And so Edmonds was like, was that the crux of it? Like the role that he was serving in, there are kind of guidelines for how you are when you're allowed to be where. And if you're Jim Edmonds and you've been a coach and you've been a player and you got a red jacket, did he feel like maybe for him personally he should have probably had a little bit of a different? I don't know. I am only speculating because I don't know. I don't try to declare something to be the case when I don't know for a fact that it is. I'm just trying to reach for an explanation on some of this stuff. And if that's not valuable, that's okay. I'm just reacting to it in a lot of the ways that Cardinals fans out there in the public are right now, because I thought it was notable and interesting. But it does seem like a lot of what's being said is stuff that we've been saying, or I'd say Cardinals fans have been saying for a while. And then the Cardinals, I think, have done a lot this offseason to address certain things. And so I don't know how applicable maybe it is now, other than if you want to embrace your past and have those types of guys around, that can be very valuable. But in some ways they do. Like he said, Isringhausen, Ryan Ludwig, we know Ozzie Smith. It's just Jim Edmonds is evidently in a different place, and talks about maybe just feeling kind of burned out by it because the last couple of years he hasn't gone to spring training, and he felt like he was pushing for a while for maybe being able to help and give some insights. And if at some point, some turn or another, he just didn't feel it was as readily received as he was hoping, I think that you could kind of hear it in his voice. That kind of burned him out a little bit. And that does stink. I'm not going to lie to you. I think that it would be great to not have it be that way. But, that's sometimes those sorts of things happen. And it seems as though, he's kind of made up his mind to kind of be at a distance now. And it's something that he is maybe making the decision to do. And by the way, for like a lot of family reasons, if you go through the whole podcast from the morning after, talks about he's got kids and his oldest son's close to graduating high school, and he doesn't want to miss those things. And so, while I think there was maybe a time where Jim Edmonds might have wanted to be more involved on a day-to-day, I definitely don't think that's the case now, because he's stepping back from broadcasting by his own choice, right? Like he's talking about baseball versus actually being hands-on helping the team. And so those levels of time commitment are not exactly the same. And he's not right now feeling as though he's got time to do either of those things. So just kind of noting the context on some of that.
After COVID, it's just like went dead silent crickets. It's like you get an email saying, hey, opening day's around the corner. Don't forget to put your day on the calendar, and, we'll give you an email. And other than that, it's like, see you at the Hall of Fame ceremony.
Now,
so
the last two managers were not major league players. Do you think maybe they're intimidated by Hall of Famers hanging around?
No, not at all. I spent a lot of time with Ollie on and off the field. I love Ollie. And Mike Schilt was amazing. It's just the atmosphere, as far as you can just feel the tension when you walk around. Like, the guys are kind of like, they're different. The players are obviously different. The game has completely changed. You walk through the clubhouse, you can see like the clubhouse guys are really busy. They don't have time. No one has time to talk. Like, you kind of sit down and you're like, hey, how's it going? And like, it's just kind of like, I feel like I'm walking into, your studio and sitting on the outside of your studio talking to people I don't know yet to get in to talk to you. And it's
so I think that might be part of it too, where he just doesn't maybe know as many people around. And so again, this is a storyline that Cardinals fans are taking and running with, because they say this matches exactly what I thought to be true about the organization. But you're hearing like one person's perspective is the only caution I would give. And that's not even really me defending the organization. It's just trying to provide context to an interview. Like, I think a lot of what he's saying is probably there's some validity. Is there tension in the clubhouse last 2 years compared to when they were winning in 22 and 21? Yeah, there's probably more tension. Like, it's a different situation when you're feeling like the expectations are to win and they're not winning. So I don't know. I think it's coinciding with the 2 years that Edmonds has said he's done less TV and has taken a step back. And he admitted that he probably held on with this broadcast job a year or two too long. And so this is kind of the culmination of a lot of those things. But that's just, again, I'm just kind of throwing out my thoughts here.
Like, I don't know. It's just weird. It's just a different atmosphere now. And it definitely is. We're definitely aware as a group that we're not really wanted around there anymore.
And if that's the case, I would like to hear from some of those other guys that they feel that way, right? Edmonds later on was asked in this interview about, who he's talked to about kind of feeling this way. He says, we really don't talk about that kind of stuff. So I don't know. It felt like an airing of grievances where the substance, I'm just not sure exactly what was some of this. It loves Ollie, loves Mike Schilt. thought those guys were great, but there's an atmosphere and a culture that's different. And like I said, a lot of it is kind of talking about the TV stuff and his role with that, feeling a certain way about that. That's Bally Sports corporate, inner workings of a business that's not really the Cardinals. So I have a hard time really commenting on how they run things. I do know that for producers and stuff, he talks about hard to get replays and stuff. That I don't know how. I don't even know. I've been in radio and stuff. I'm sure it's not easy to just like magically wave a wand and get the replays to come up. So some of that stuff I think is just like it gets lumped in with everything else that he's talking about, and you end up kind of conflating some things that are maybe not related. But I did think this was interesting when he talked about a little bit more about the culture stuff and said that they were kind of cutting the fat when it came to the extras being around the team.
COVID thing was the perfect excuse to just cut the ties with all the extra crap. You know how they say cut the fat? And basically that's what Mo said to a couple of us when we were working as his assistants. Basically cut the fat, and it just continued. And it's just like ever since then it's been, if you see each other in the hallway, it's like, hey, how you doing? How's the family? And then see you next month. It's just weird.
So that I think is the crux of a lot of maybe where for Jim Edmonds, where it's coming from is like, He was a special assistant, and then if Mo really said we had to cut the fat, you're a person. You're not just a person. You're a Cardinals Hall of Famer, right? Like I would understand if he's feeling a certain sort of way about the way that went down, and then a lot of this conversation is fallout from that a handful of years later. You mix in some frustration with just the TV industry in general. There's just frustrations. No matter your line of work, there's going to be frustrations, but that's one where I think when you listen to the full interview, he had some expectations about how he could, he talked about can't do the telestrator, like wanting to draw diagrams and images and stuff. Like, I guess he thought maybe that would be something he's seen on TV, so he could do it. And they don't have that capability or offer it during games. I don't know. So I feel like that's some of the frustration. And then the stuff with Mo, but that's not new, in my opinion. Like, people want to know my reaction to this interview. I found a lot of it to be just, kind of like, okay, can see where he's coming from with that, but not new or compelling in a way that I was like, oh, that's explosive. That's different. The one thing that maybe came of it is he kind of was beating around the bush saying, I can't name who it was, but he plays third base and he's from Newport Beach, and he wanted McGuire to come to spring, and they said, no, they have all they need. So, I think when you really dive into it, there are some valid things being said here. Some of that has been stuff we already knew, but some of it is like, yeah, you can see that culture is an important thing, and you do. You have a guy that was ingrained in the organization, a Cardinal Hall of Famer, that's feeling like, the culture isn't what it once was. But I don't think that's a secret to anybody, and I don't think the timeliness of it is applicable as to how the Cardinals are going into 2025. I've been to these winter warm-ups a number of times, and they always kind of have the way of making you feel like, oh yeah, here we go. It's going to be, this is the year. But this did feel like there was a good feel around the club and around the organization with the guys you talk to at winter warm-up. Whereas in some years you're like, okay, you can kind of tell they're maybe, we're in the best shape of our lives, yada, yada, yada. But there was some fire behind some of these guys that I think is indicative of the culture turning in a good, positive direction. And maybe that's not applicable to Edmonds and in his situation the last handful of years, but it also did kind of coincide with him joking about saying, I don't really watch baseball when I'm not working, which it sounds like he's got a lot on his plate, so that's fine. But that's probably not an indication of the guy that's ready to be the martyr almost of Cardinal culture being thrown to the side. And, I'm sure he wants to be down there in spring, and everybody wants to feel like they're wanted and welcomed, but I also don't know how much that post-COVID, again, I think it goes back to that 5 years ago. He was maybe more involved, and then they scaled back and then never really re-extended that olive branch to the extent that he wanted to see. And maybe that's something that could be learned by the Cardinals as they embark upon this reinvesting in infrastructure. The heart of the organization is something that matters too. But like I said, there'd be folks like Willie, like Ozzie, Ludwig, Isringhausen, folks that are Cardinals alumni, that have been around and are still around in various capacities. And so I still think that is a culture that does exist. It just maybe was not as applicable to Edmonds, and because he was in the broadcast role, that can change maybe sometimes how the clubhouse views you, because I don't want this to be safe for TV, so maybe I don't share that aspect, or whatever the case might be. Like, yeah, I don't know. Maybe it's just a little bit different because of the role that he was in, and there was really no ill intentions behind it. But I can't speak for all the people involved in it. I know it was something Cardinals fans were reacting to and had thoughts about. So these are mine. Let me know yours, Cardinals fans, and let me know if you're excited for spring training coming up, because I am looking like I am making it down to Jupiter. Start my drive down the Monday after the Super Bowl. So excited about that. If you have a business that you would like to partner alongside the YouTube channel, alongside B-Schaeff Daily during spring training, we are still happily accepting conversations about that, as we'll be planning to bring back the, what did I call it last year? The sights and sounds of spring training at Cardinals camp in Jupiter. That's really where I have the most fun, is those days before the games actually begin, because you get to see really where the heart and soul of the club is, and as it comes together for the new season. So that's something I hope to be able to give you guys some insights into as well this year. And just let me know if you, from a business angle, have any knowledge of anybody that would be interested in partnering with the channel, because that would be a big help as we look to get ourselves out there on the map a little bit more each year. So thank you guys so much for all your support, for all your listening, and we will talk to you next time on B-Schaeff Daily. Peace.